Okay, let's begin. So this is part 2 for basic terms and concepts in second language acquisition. So there's part 1, and if you have not watched part 1, I think it's better for you to watch it first before you watch this part 2. Okay, so this is a quick review of part 1. So we talked about these topics in part 1. And we're going to talk about these things in part 2. So we're going to begin with the contrast, difference between competence and performance. So this is one of the maybe most basic concepts in linguistics. So if you're familiar with theoretical linguistics or syntax, I think you are already familiar with this distinction between competence and performance. This was introduced by the linguist called Noam Chomsky. And so what is competence and what is performance? Competence consists of the mental representations of linguistic rules that constitute the speaker hearer's internal grammar. Maybe this is too difficult. But anyway, so what is performance? Performance consists of the use of this grammar in the comprehension and production of language. So let me explain these things. So so let's say these are speakers, so humans, so we speak language, so we are all speakers of some language. And competence is here in our brains, so it is the ability of language. So we have our own mental grammar in our brains, and so we have the ability of language in our brains, and we call this thing competence. And if you can speak any kind of language, you have it. You have this thing in your brain. And when you say something, when you speak, we call that production. So you produce language. And this thing is a kind of performance. So we use this competence to produce a sentence. And if you don't have this competence in the first place, you can't produce anything. You have to have this thing to produce a sentence. So if you don't have the mental grammar of Japanese, you can't say Japanese sentences. And so if this person produces a sentence in Japanese or in English or whatever, then this listener comprehends that sentence using his or her own competence or mental grammar. And if this person doesn't have the competence, this person just can't comprehend or understand this sentence that was produced by this person. So you need to have this in your brain to comprehend or to understand sentences spoken by other people. And this part, comprehension, this is also a kind of performance. But comprehension and production, they are not exactly the same as the competence. So the competence is the ability inside you. And you use that ability to produce and comprehend sentences. So we should make a distinction between competence and performance. These are not the same thing. Okay? And I want to give you another example to explain the difference between competence and performance. So here we talk about a boy, a girl, and a man. So we can say, in English, we can say the boy smiled. So this is grammatical in English, I hope. And we can also say the boy the girl liked smiled. So this girl liked the boy, and that boy the girl liked, he smiled. So we can say this: the boy the girl liked smiled. Okay? And what about this one? The boy the girl the man met liked smiled. Very complicated, isn't it? But this is actually grammatical. This man met this girl. Okay, so the man met the girl. Yes, the man met the girl, and the girl that the man met, she liked the boy. Okay, and that boy the girl liked, he smiled. Okay, so this makes sense and actually grammatically correct. This is grammatical. But I think you can't understand this. So this sentence is possible as an English sentence. This is possible as far as competence is concerned. This is possible as far as the mental grammar of native English speaker is concerned. However, this is difficult, extremely difficult, or even impossible to comprehend and produce. We can't really comprehend this, we can't really understand this, and we usually can't produce this kind of sentence. So in terms of performance, this is not possible. This is extremely difficult, at least. So why is it so difficult? Why is it impossible? It's due to the limitation of working memory. So if you are not familiar with working memory, please look it up. Maybe not in the dictionary, but maybe on the internet. And this is also an important concept in linguistics and second language acquisition research, but I'm not going to details of this concept here. But our working memory is limited, so we can't really produce and comprehend sentences like this. But this is possible. This is grammatical in English. Okay. So what is possible in terms of competence and what is possible in terms of performance are different. And what about this one? The boy girl man met liked smiled. This is just not possible in terms of competence. So this is just impossible. This is ungrammatical. This is not grammatical. This is not allowed by competence. The mental grammar of a native English speaker. This is not allowed by that. So of course we can't comprehend this sentence. We can't produce this sentence, but that's not because of performance problems. This is a problem with the competence. Okay. Right. So let's move on to the next topic, which is naturalistic versus instructed second language acquisition. So this contrast, this difference may be quite important. So please try to understand this. So what is naturalistic second language acquisition? So it takes place in naturally occurring social situations. So let me give you an example. So let's say this is a Japanese family, and this family moves to the US. Okay, so and these children, maybe they will go to maybe elementary school or kindergarten or daily nursery kind of thing, and they will interact, they will play with other children there, and those other children, they speak English, I guess. So these Japanese children will pick up English from those children in the US, and those children, of course, speak English. So through playing with those children, these Japanese children will gradually acquire English. So this is an example of naturalistic second language acquisition. Okay, and but this will not really happen to many people. So for example, in my case, for example, I learned English like this. This is a typical example of instructed second language acquisition. So instructed second language acquisition is done through study with the help of guidance from reference books, maybe textbooks, and classroom instruction by the teacher. So this is a classroom where we have a teacher who teaches English, a foreign language, to the students. Okay, so this is an example of instructed second language acquisition, and maybe many people learn a second language or a foreign language like this. And so the situations where these two types of second language acquisition take place are different, but also maybe there are many other differences. So in naturalistic second language acquisition, usually we have many native speaker models around us. So if we go to the US, there will be many native English speakers around us, and they always speak English. So we can listen to many examples of English sentences, and by listening to those many examples of English sentences, we will gradually learn the grammar of English. Okay, but in the case of instructed SLA, usually there is only one model. In this case, the teacher, and in many cases, in many cases, the teacher is not a native speaker. So there's only one model, and that one model is often not a native speaker. And usually, the teacher teaches grammar. So we learn the grammar first, and only after that, we think of examples of sentences. So so in naturalistic second language acquisition, we listen to many examples first, and then we gradually learn the grammar. But but in instructed second language acquisition, we learn the grammar first, and then we try to think of examples. Okay, so the direction is the opposite. And this distinction, acquisition versus learning, is related to naturalistic versus instructed second language acquisition. So here, acquisition refers to the subconscious process of picking up a language through exposure, and in contrast, learning refers to the conscious process of studying it. So, I think you can see the connection between this and this. So if in naturalistic second language acquisition, you acquire a second language. And in instructed second language acquisition, you learn a second language. So, so for example, here we have the word subconscious, okay, subconscious. So these children who move to the US, they will pick up English subconsciously, so they don't really think consciously that they are learning English. So they naturally acquire English, maybe through playing with the other kids or talking with the other kids. So they can acquire English subconsciously or maybe unconsciously. But in this kind of learning, we are consciously studying English, okay? So learning refers to this conscious process of studying it. So in second language acquisition research, we sometimes draw this distinction. So this distinction can be very important in some cases. So please remember this. And there are some important hypotheses or claims concerning this distinction. So this person, this researcher called Krashin, he's a very, very famous researcher in the field of second language acquisition, and he claims that acquisition and learning are completely distinct processes. So these are not the same thing. And so, for example, instructed second language learners can learn grammatical rule, but that learned rule is not the same as the corresponding rule acquired by native speakers and naturalistic second language learners. Even though, so for example, let's say plural S. So one book, two books. So plural S. So that's a grammatical rule, and instructed second language learners can learn that rule, of course. But even if they can learn it, the rule that they learned is not actually the same as the rule acquired by native speakers and naturalistic second language learners. So this is what this researcher claims. So what is learned is not the same as what is acquired. So learning does not lead to acquisition. So even if you learn something, it doesn't mean that you acquired it. So what is learned does not become what is acquired. So learning does not lead to acquisition. So even if you learn something, you can't acquire it. You have to acquire it from the beginning. So this hypothesis is called the non-interface hypothesis, because there is no interface between learning and acquisition. So there is no route from learning to acquisition. So this is called the non-interface hypothesis. So if we have non-interface hypothesis, we also have interface hypothesis. So, but I'm not going to talk about that in this video. And this is also related to acquisition versus learning, because sometimes these, sometimes implicit and explicit learning, these are sometimes synonymous with acquisition and learning respectively. So in some cases, acquisition is the same as implicit learning, and learning is the same as explicit learning. So acquisition sometimes mean the same thing as implicit learning, and learning sometimes means the same thing as explicit learning. So if you're not familiar with the words implicit and explicit, please use your dictionary. So for example, Oxford Learner's Dictionary explains like this. So implicit means suggested without being directly expressed, and explicit means set down or shown in an open or direct way. So please note the difference here. In an open or direct way, so that you have no doubt about what is happening. So implicit learning, it takes place without awareness. So learners are not directly aware of what they are learning. And this is typical of children's language acquisition. So even though children are learning a language, they are not really aware of what they are actually learning. So their case, when they go to the States. And explicit learning is conscious and intentional. So learners are aware of what they are learning, and they intend to learn them. So they have the intention, they try to learn them. They try to learn them intentionally. They have the will, they have the intention to learn them. And they are of course aware, they are conscious. They know what they are learning. Okay. Okay, so in this video, we learned about these differences: competence versus performance, naturalistic versus instructed second language acquisition, and acquisition versus learning, and implicit versus explicit learning. Okay, so these are all very, very important concepts in second language acquisition research. So I hope you will remember this. Alright, let's finish. Bye.